first item on the agenda is a presentation and discussion of effluent generating and recharge and a whole lot of stuff that was put out on Facebook. So I'm going to prep the beginning of this with some statements, and then we'll have Arizona Water and the City of Casa Grande do a presentation on really how recharge and replenishment and how these programs really work. I think the most interesting thing about House Bill 2753 is it has very little to do with that actual mechanism that takes place. What this bill does, House Bill 2753, does provide a financial, remember this, a financial mechanism to allow water providers in the Pinal active management area to apply, that are applying for a new designation of assured water, or a DAWS, to gradually transition the cost of replenishment groundwater from your property tax to a water bill. Because that whole mechanism is very, very complicated, but we didn't want providers to do a sticker shock, so there'll be a phase out from property tax to the water bill in time. It won't change in the dollar amounts. It's just it'll be shifted to another area, and it gives it a 10-year ramp down or ramp up, either way you want to look at it, mechanism to the water providers. It allows providers to keep the cost of the replenishment obligation at a parcel level for up to 10 years. The House bill also does require the following to this period. The municipal providers must assume 10% of the parcel level's replenishment obligation each year until the cost of the replenishment is fully transferable. So I want everybody to kind of understand, House Bill 2753 really was more of a, like I said, a mechanism for transferring the cost from one area to another area, from your tax bill to your water bill. So for that, I what it doesn't do, and this is some stuff that I've been asked to talk about, it does not that all water sources delivered to the customer must meet safe drinking water standards set by the federal government and the state of Arizona. None of that's changing. That legislation doesn't change any of that. So why people think it did, I don't know. Requires providers of delivery recycled sewage water to their customers for drinking, bathing, or cooking. It does not require them to do that. Does not. So from that, there's a couple more there, but I think we've hit home, and I want to get on to the presentation. I don't know how you've scripted it. Who goes first? Who wants to come up first? Introduce yourself, who you're with, and these people have taken time out of their busy days. They all have plenty of things to do, but I think it's important that the public understands that the state of Arizona takes a lot of, I don't want to say pride, but they're very, very conscious of how we recharge this water. We don't want to poison anybody. We have no intention of poisoning anybody. It's not going to, we just going to make sure it's done right. So please pay attention, and hopefully everybody will learn something. Thank you, Kevin. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Casa Grande. How's that?
There you go. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Casa Grande. Been working with the city in that capacity for 19 years now, and wastewater division is one of my 8 divisions that I manage for the City of Casa Grande. And really, it's a pleasure to be here today to present how we reclaim our water from our waste stream and put it to beneficial use. And so that's what we're here to do, and I'll go through my presentation very quickly, and then, of course, at the end of our presentation today, stand for any questions that there might be. So I also have with me, if I get tied up with any technical difficulty, I have my chief plant operator, Clifton Sanders, is here, and he's been with the city for 20-plus years and is the person that really manages that process for us. We work underneath his certifications through the state, and he does a great job managing our plant. So our mission is to provide and maintain an effluent that meets or exceeds the federal, state, or local standards, and that's important. We could treat our wastewater to a lesser standard, but we want to take advantage of treating to an A+ class water, which is the highest class that we can treat to, so that it expands our ability to reuse or recharge. It gives us the opportunity to really take the most beneficial use of that wastewater stream. We maintain an efficient collection system, and I'll get into some more details about our collection system, but it's important to maintain that collection system so that it doesn't contaminate the ground. And then we monitor our discharge through our different permits that we have through Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Just a couple of highlights about our wastewater collection system. We have over 500 miles of collection system within the city of Casa Grande, and it serves both city residents as well as some county residents that are near our infrastructure, and we've allowed them to tie into our system, and we treat their waste as well. And we have 550 manholes, and we go through an extensive process to maintain that system. We clean the sewer lines, we maintain our manholes on an annual basis, and then we monitor each of those lines so that we determine when they start to age to that point. No different than an asphalt pavement. When it starts to deteriorate, we need to do some corrective action, and we have that preventative maintenance program within our system. Our wastewater treatment plant, as it currently lies, is 18 million gallons a day. We are just completing a conversion. We were at 12 million gallon a day capacity. We're going to be finished in the fourth quarter of this year with our expansion to 18 million gallons a day capacity. And we have a future capacity of over 50 million gallons a day at that location if we choose to continue to treat in a centralized location for Casa Grande. We do have other opportunities, and we evaluate that on an ongoing basis. In 2024, we treated over 2 billion gallons of waste that came in from our residents and our industrial users. And again, we produce that A+ quality effluent. We have 12 certified operators through the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality that work at our plant. 2 of those are grade 4, which is the highest grade that you can get for certifications. And if anybody knows anything about the wastewater industry, finding talented people is very difficult. So we have to really grow from within. So when our maintenance workers come on board, you can see how many of them have their grade 1 certifications, and then 2, and then 3, and then ultimately 4. So if kids ever thought about what they want to do for a living, if they can get over the stigmatism of wastewater, it's a great place to be able to grow your career very quickly if you can get through that certification program. And when we go out to the schools, we try to promote that as much as we can. But difficult to find certified operators. We're very, very fortunate to have the level of operators that we have in Casa Grande. And then our treatment process. So our primary treatment is basically to get any of the difficult debris out of that waste stream. If you have a swimming pool and you picture a rock going into your filter, you can imagine what that's going to do to your impeller. So now you have to imagine all the waste that anybody can send to us, what that can do to our systems that we have in our wastewater treatment plants. So that first thing is to screen that debris out so that we do not have to treat it and it doesn't impact our pumps in a negative way. And then our secondary treatment is our biological treatment process. And those are our aeration or oxidation ditches. And that's where we introduce our micro-environmental environment that we've created, basically our bugs that digest all the nutrients in our waste stream. If you've ever seen our aeration ditches, when I give the tours to the kids or the folks that come out to our wastewater plant, it's Willy Wonka's chocolate factory river. So that is the process that we do, but that's where the bugs work, and we start to digest that waste and get it to a place where we can then treat it through the rest of the process. Our next process is our clarifiers, and that's where we separate the liquids from the solids. Effluent is the liquid portion of that waste stream. The solids go in their direction, and I'll talk a little bit about how we process those in just a bit. But then those liquids are what turns into our treated effluent. So after that, those clarifiers, we go into our tertiary treatment, which is where we really just filter out all those fine particulates out of that effluent. And then we have to go through a disinfection process, and then which is basically chlorinate the water so that we get rid of any of the pathogens that might be in there, and then we have to dechlorinate it before we're able to discharge it. We are working on a plant expansion that's going to be finished the fourth quarter of this year, and then we have phase B of that plant expansion, where we're going to actually be utilizing, instead of chemical treatment for disinfection, we're going to be using UV, ultraviolet treatment, to reduce the amount of chemicals that we need to process our waste. Some of the key statistics, we serve approximately 60,000 residents in Casa Grande. We are planning for growth in the future, but all of our processes meet the ADEQ standards, as Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and we have 2 permits that we have to maintain. Our aquifer protection permit, which is renewed anytime we change our process. We go through an evaluation with the state to determine what that permit should say, what levels we have to meet that permit requirements. And so we get a new APP anytime we do a plant expansion. And then we have our Arizona Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, and that's what really governs that effluent when we're able to either discharge that or reuse it.
Kevin, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
How often does the state come and do inspections? Because don't they monitor your operation on some kind of a regular basis?
The best way I can answer that is whenever they want.
Whenever I was pretty sure that was the answer. But
we do have regularly scheduled inspections where they come out and they look at our daily reports and things like that. But they can come out anytime they want and take a look at our process. And we encourage them to come out. We like to think we're the flagship of wastewater treatment. I'm sure there are better plants out there in the world, but we do a really good job of maintaining our plant and ensuring that we are right where we need to be for regulatory compliance.
yes, heavily inspected and heavily regulated.
Yes.
Thank you.
Probably too much, but we really don't have that choice. This diagram just kind of gives a line graph of our different treatment process. The upper process is the liquids, where we basically go through that secondary clarifier where it separates those liquids from the solids. We go through that filtration process, then we go into that chlorine or chlorination basin, disinfection basin, and then we dechlorinate, and then we discharge. And then our solids go through a similar process where we further digest that waste to a point where there's no anything that's going to impact the environment when we get rid of those solids. We currently use that effluent product, our solids, at our landfill. We use it as an alternative daily cover, which is also regulated by Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. So we have a permit to use that solids material out there, and we mix it at a 2-to-1 ratio with topsoil. Landfills are required to have 6 inches of cover every day, and that's a very expensive process, so being able to use this product out there at a beneficial use really helps us reduce the cost to the city and our residents.
Excuse me, ask you a question.
Sure.
So, because you're talking about the solids, does it work similar to the digester process like they use out in the for dairy cattle?
Yeah, yes, very, introduce air to that system. It helps break it down and get rid of the nutrients that are negatively impactful on the environment. So once we get to a point and we test and meet those requirements, then we're able to use it at our landfill. There's also a lot of other ways you can use that solids material. You can land apply it for fertilizer and things like that, but we currently don't do that.
As you say, from a digester, it comes out as just plain dirt that really doesn't have anything. They use it for bedding for the cattle and they do all this stuff, but it really isn't good for topsoil because everything's been removed from it. So.
Correct. It's pretty inert at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
So our Phase 4A expansion, which will be finished in this fourth quarter of this year, we spent just over $32 million in that plant expansion, and that gets us from 12 million gallons a day to 18 million gallons a day. We've also expanded our solids handling capability with this step and improved our odor control. Our Phase 4B, which is under design right now, is where we'll be introducing the UV disinfection to our process, as well as putting odor control throughout our entire plant. But we're really trying to create redundancy in the process that we have and replace some of our older equipment so that we're a little more modernized and making sure that we're ready for that next growth spurt whenever that happens, but sure it hasn't slowed down of late. So we're continuing to grow in Casa Grande. So the Class A plus effluent, we just went over the different treatment processes that I showed you, but the approved uses for A plus water are listed right there. For Casa Grande's case, we use our effluent and send it directly to our golf course for irrigating the grass out there. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. But you can see the list of items that you're able to use that for. We also send it to SRP's Desert Basin power generation plant. They use it in their cooling towers. And then our most of our effluent gets discharged to the north branch of the Santa Cruz, and I'll go over that right now. So that is what's called our managed recharge facility. Now there's two types of recharge facilities. There's a managed recharge facility which you take advantage of a natural waterway to discharge your effluent into and then allow that to percolate into the ground and further get beneficial treatment through the ground process. But we have a 5.8 mile long managed facility in the north branch of the Santa Cruz, and I'll show you a picture of that here in just a second. But we're able to recharge 3,500 acre feet of water each year. Now, we don't achieve that today because anytime it rains and there is water introduced into that system, we get zero credit for what we discharge. So anytime we have a monsoon, or in some cases, in our area, it's the San Carlos Irrigation District, they have points along their distribution system where they're able to discharge their water, and that goes into the north branch of the Santa Cruz. So anytime their flows have been introduced to ours, we get zero credit for that. So we have the capability of recharging 3,500 acre feet, but we don't achieve that because of other influences.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kevin. When you backed up two slides, you're saying where you pump it to the golf course, to the toilets, to all this. So you have to have a separate line running into those places. I'm looking at like fire protection systems. So like my home is covered. I have a fire sprinklers in my house, which flooded one day. It was real fun, but a whole nother problem. But that comes just from the main line. And so how do you, So if you had fire protection systems in, say, industrial parks, right, would you have a separate line running to that industrial park? So then in that case, building code in the city, would you have the provision to say, well, okay, this industrial park or this area has to have a separate line for effluent water to come and service all these areas?
Yeah, I think it's commonly called purple pipe.
The purple pipe, I get it,
Right.
but I'm just wondering, do you have that provision in your city codes?
We don't have it as a city code, but we have the system in place. We just finished it's about an 8-mile long effluent delivery line into our industrial area. It's also an opportunity for us to have an alternative discharge point in the main branch of the Santa Cruz, but that line was developed to deliver effluent to our industrial users. And it is in place today. We're currently upgrading our effluent pumps to feed that system, and we're going through the process of negotiating with some of our industries the deal that we're going to make with them so that they can take advantage of using that treated effluent for cooling towers, fire protection, or any other use that is permitted. And so that way it doesn't impact the potable water use of those industries and really helps with the drinking water situation in our area. We have plans to be delivering this water to the mine that's going to be in operation in Casa Grande here in the very near future. They're really looking forward to having that opportunity to not have to use potable water in their processing.
Val Vista and MCG.
Yes.
Well, I'm just curious because when you do that to say the industrial park, you already plumbed a building, and now you got to come back and say, oh, well, now we're going to do the toilets, we're going to do the fire system. There's a lot of replumbing going on there if it's established. I mean, thinking of Lucid and those kind of places.
Yeah, some of them actually designed those systems when they originally did it, but if it is going to be a retrofit, it's a separate system
Right.
that has to be, because those streams have to be separated.
Yes.
There has to be a backflow so that there's no cross-contamination possibilities.
And my point being that there is some thought behind this someplace that's going on.
Lots of thought and lots of money, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a Google map look of our recharge facility. To the right side of the screen, the red dot is our discharge point. That's just north of our wastewater treatment plant, and then it goes 5.8 miles to the west. Now, part of our permit requires us to test the groundwater in that area. So we were required to build 4 groundwater monitoring wells as part of this permit. And it's hard to see on this picture, but they're up there, and we have to sample from those wells, test that water, and provide those reports to make sure we're maintaining our permit requirements. And we do that on an annual basis. Let's see here. And then the last slide here, soil aquifer treatment is basically, this happens when it rains, this happens when we discharge our effluent, this happens when any water hits the ground. That water is absorbed and it goes through a beneficial treatment of the natural environment out there. So even though we've treated our effluent to a point that is safe to discharge, as that percolates through that system, it gets cleaner as it goes deeper through the ground. So that's how it's worked forever, and that's how it's going to continue to work. But we take great pride in meeting our permit requirements. We don't have to treat to an A+ standard. We do that for a reason, and that's because we want to take advantage of every drop of water, especially here in Arizona where water is gold, and it is the future, and we need to maintain that resource. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Any questions for Kevin?
Steve,
Yes, Jeff.
on one of your charts there you had, and what purpose of this whole meeting is to put people at ease. It said it could be used for watering livestock with USDA approval. Explain how that would happen, because I know with effluent that goes into like an urban lake, is it really safe to, but it's safe for animals?
Yeah, and actually the one up there includes irrigating food crops that can be eaten, raw. So, I mean, each of those reuses have to be permitted. So each one is reviewed. So if If a farmer wanted to use that for agricultural use, we would go through a permit process to get that approved. They would have to have a permit, we have to have a permit to deliver. So it's all looked at every time we make any changes to how we use that effluent.
So if you have a backyard garden and you have heads of lettuce and you spray it on the lettuce, it would technically be safe to eat still.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit up here and drink a glass of water of treated effluent just because I know how great Arizona Water treats their water. I would prefer to drink theirs than that, but it is totally safe.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts? Kevin, thank you very much.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Terri Sue with Arizona Water.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Terri Sue Rossi, and I'm the Vice President of Water Resources for Arizona Water Company. And I've worked in the water industry in Arizona for 40 years. And I know what you're thinking. I look great for being 80. So, and I feel great for being 80. But the only advantage of being old is that you've seen a lot. And I think that the reason Supervisor Miller asked me to present today is because I've seen a lot of this picture over the last 40 years. So let me see here. This is the slide thing. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll just talk about a little bit of history, which happens that the first year that I began working in the water industry was, in fact, in 1986. And in the legislature, we passed the first recharge program for the state of Arizona. I was 21 years old at the time, and I was an intern working for the Natural Resources and Agricultural Committee, and that bill went through the committee that I was assigned to. And so my first segue into the water resources in Arizona was at the Arizona State Legislature at the time. In 1993, we created a groundwater replenishment district called the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, and that entity exists today and operates, and it's still responsible for replenishing groundwater. In fact, it's the only entity in the state that is required to replenish groundwater. Actually, it's the only one who is authorized to replace groundwater. And then in 1994, we went through the process of streamlining the recharge program. So the original recharge program was established by the legislature. It was a little clunky, and my first job at the Department of Water Resources was to issue those permits in the Phoenix Active Management area. And so as a result of some years of practice, we understood we needed to modify the program. And so in 1994, it was streamlined into the program as we know it today. And the purpose of that program was to protect the general economy and welfare of the state by encouraging the use of renewable water supplies, which, by the way, is also the same objective for the Groundwater Code itself. And the Groundwater the Underground Water Savings, Storage Savings and Replenishment Act was really designed to create a cost-effective method for water providers like Arizona Water Company and others that could not afford to build a surface water treatment plant. This was a much more affordable method and just as effective method of putting that water to use. And so the first permits were issued starting in the 1980s, and recharge has become a foundational element of water management in Arizona, not just here, but throughout the state. Before I talk too much about the program, I just want to give you a feel for the complicated nature of groundwater in the Pinal AMA. And some people don't really, or in Pinal County. Some people think of the Pinal County as being entirely encompassed within the Pinal AMA, but that is not the case. There are 3 active management areas in Pinal County. And so the state of Arizona is divvied up into 50 groundwater basins. Some of them are called active management areas because that's where we have higher levels of regulation. And then outside those AMAs, there are lower levels of regulation. As you can see from this slide, there are 3 active management areas inside of Pinal County, and there are areas outside of those active management areas. Arizona Water Company serves 3 primary water systems within Pinal County. There's what we call the Superstition system. That includes Apache Junction, it includes Gold Canyon, it includes Superior. We have down in the southeast, we have our Falcon Valley water system, which includes Saddlebrook Ranch, and it includes Oracle and San Manuel. And then our what we consider to be our primary water system, our largest water system, is the Pinal Valley water system. That includes a number of water systems within that, and it serves the Stanfield area, Arizona City, Casa Grande, and Coolidge. So it might look at the moment easy to understand, but if we go to the next slide, this is actually a picture of those groundwater basins themselves. So in addition to the active management areas, there are several smaller basins outside the active management areas that are located in Pinal, including Dunaway Wash, including the Upper San Pedro, including Dripping Springs, and also including the Salt River. So there's 7 groundwater basins within Pinal County, which makes for a more interesting water management picture. But let's talk about what's groundwater recharge. So groundwater recharge refers to the replenishment, and I'm going to use that in the more common sense, not as in replenishment that's done by the CAGRD, but as the replenishment of groundwater aquifer through natural, incidental, or artificial means. So natural is when, it rains, when it snows, and that water percolates into the ground. It finds its way to rivers and streams and ultimately to the aquifer. That's natural recharge, happens every day. Kevin was referring to that in his presentation. Incidental recharge is when a water user, like a municipal or an industrial or agricultural water user, uses water and then a portion of that water goes unused and finds its way to the aquifer. An example of this might be that you're growing crops, you apply a water supply, and some of that water is used consumptively by the crops, but the remainder of that goes to the aquifer. The final way to replenish the aquifer is through artificial recharge, and this is where a water provider or others intentionally add a non-groundwater supply to the aquifer in order to offset groundwater pumping and to augment water supplies for the future. And they do that through these legally permitted recharge facilities. And Kevin mentioned that the city of Casa Grande has a managed recharge facility. That is one type of facility, and I'm going to talk more about some of those in a minute. But let's talk about replenishment for a minute. So replenishment is the function of replacing groundwater pumping considered to be in excess of sustainable levels. It is conducted through artificial recharge facilities that are legally permitted. And again, it's the same facilities. We'll talk about those shortly. The difference between replenishment and recharge is the replenishment happens after the groundwater pumping has occurred. The other difference between recharge and replenishment is the responsibility of replenishment currently lies solely with the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. So no other entity has that responsibility. Everyone else would be recharging it, and that would be something you would do in advance of recovering those credits. The legal sources of water for recharge or for replenishment. So basically, it's any water supply that is not a groundwater supply. And in Arizona, we're typically looking at Central Arizona Project water, CAP water, Colorado River water, surface water like, say, Gila River water or water from the Queen Creek, and effluent. Effluent is the only supply that requires an aquifer protection permit, which is an additional level of regulation that Kevin referred to. On the right, you can see there are two. These are actually constructed recharge facilities. They're both located inside of Pinal County. One is the Superstition Mountains Recharge Program. That one's located in the Phoenix Active Management Area, and it's owned and operated by CAP. The one below is the Pinal Valley Recharge and Recovery Project, and that's located in the Pinal AMA, and it's owned and operated by Arizona Water Company. Let's see here. So let's talk about the different types of permits. So I mentioned to you earlier that the program was revamped in 1994. When that was done, all of these different permits were created, so you cannot operate a recharge project in Arizona without these permits in place. So you need underground storage facility permit, you would need a groundwater savings facility permit, depending on the type of facility that you want to operate. So you have to have a facility permit. There are two types of underground storage facility permits, a constructed facility and a managed. Casa Grande's facility is a managed facility. Of the 12 constructed facilities in the Pinal AMA, 2 facilities store CAP water and 10 of them store effluent. Of the managed, there are 3 in the Pinal AMA, 1 stores CAP water, and actually it should say 2 store effluent, not 3. So there are also these groundwater savings facility permits, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how those processes work in a moment. But there are 4 in the Pinal AMA, 3 of them store CAP water, and 1 stores effluent. So anyone can store water at a storage facility in Arizona, a legally permitted storage facility in Arizona, but they are required to acquire a water storage permit. So whether or not you own the facility is irrelevant. Even if you own the facility, you have to have a water storage permit. There are 50 such permits in the Pinal AMA, and whether you're going to store or recover that water in a single year, you have to have that permit, or if you're going to store the water for the long term, say for future when there's a shortage, you would still have to have one of those permits. Everybody who gets a water storage permit has a long-term storage account. It's like a bank account, and the Department of Water Resources posts the number of credits that you've accrued in that account. Finally, to get that water out of the ground, you have to have recovery well permits, and that's a different process. And each of these permits have a very rigorous application process, and each of these permits have conditions that you have to comply with, and you have to report that information sometimes on a quarterly basis and then always on an annual basis. So in the Pinal AMA, there are 207 recovery well permits.
Real quick question, Mr. So we were talking about the two projects. One was holding water, the two ponds that you were showing on the side, those recharge ponds.
Yes.
How do they recharge? Is that percolation?
Yes, these just percolate. So what happens is, and by the way, I wanted to mention that I brought my recharge hydrologist with me, Mr. Dick Thompson, and his is his encore career. He is our recharge hydrologist. He spent most of his time with the city of Tucson operating their recharge program, which is quite extensive.
So those are, I'm sorry to back up on you like this, but they're pretty large projects. How long does it take that water to get, like how deep's the water table? How long does it take the water to get there? But how long does it take those ponds? How often are they recharged for that? Are you maintaining a constant level? Are you having to pump it? I'm just curious because evaporation and then the fact that it doesn't really go too far into the ground.
Yeah, so it depends on the facility. And since we have direct knowledge of the Pinal Valley Recharge and Recovery Facility, I would ask Dick to come up and give a very brief answer to that question because he keeps track of this all the time, so he knows exactly how long it takes from it to get to the surface.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I went to the ribbon cutting of that facility there the day they turned water into it the first time. Anyway.
Cool.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Your name.
So I'm just curious because we see it's a recharge pond. Okay, great. So it's percolating.
Right.
So it's percolating at X rate. So it goes down. Some more water comes in. I mean, how do you balance that? Maybe that's kind of an open question. But.
Okay. When you start one of these, like at the beginning of the year, when the pond is dry, you flood the pond, and then that water slowly saturates the matrix from the bottom of the basin to the aquifer. At Pinal Valley, it's about 150 feet.
Okay.
That can take several weeks to a couple of months before you have a direct contact from the basin to the aquifer. Once you've established that contact and that ground is saturated, then that water moves quickly through the matrix. And so the water that you're putting in like today, which is about 7 acre-feet, that water is pushing down and moving by gravity into the aquifer, and it's pushing the water that's already there into the aquifer. So it's like a train that you've established.
Right, so it just depends on the geology of the area, too, because you might have caliche layers in there that would stop the water from moving. So
Yes.
do you have to break that up to make that happen or like puncture it, essentially?
There's different ways of handling that. At Pinal Valley, it's sandy silt all the way to the aquifer.
Okay,
so
well,
that's
that's a good spot. Okay.
Now, other areas like down in Tucson, they have a lot of caliche at some of the recharge projects. And what happens there, if you run into a confining layer, and you might run into a confining layer that we don't know about under a recharge project, usually what happens is gravity takes over and the water just moves sideways until it finds a way down to the aquifer.
Okay.
Just like it's spilling water onto a coffee table
Sure.
and then it runs off the side.
Okay. Well, you answered my question. The geology of the area is sandy, so it goes to it. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And if you were wondering, I believe what Dick meant by the Matrix, I just got done watching the Matrix movies. What he meant by the Matrix was the soil beneath the
Not Mr. Smith.
right, not
Okay,
not
just
Mr. Smith. So, all right. So I think we talked about this, and this actually is kind of a picture of what Dick just described. So I kind of feel like we kind of got a picture of that. So you can see He was talking about the matrix would be that vadose zone, that's that dry area, and the little lines are the water going down. Once that connection's made to the aquifer, things go pretty quick. It doesn't really matter the source of the water. It could be CAP, it could be effluent, it could be a surface water supplies. It just can't be a groundwater supplies. And it could go into a recharge basin, it could go into an injection well. There are a variety of methods, or it could be a managed facility like what the city of Casa Grande operates. This is just a location of where all the ones that are currently permitted in the Pinal AMA are at. Not all of these permits are actively used, but these are permits that have been issued. The groundwater savings facilities, we talked about this. I find that this is a little bit harder for people to understand than a recharge project. So in a groundwater savings facility, and again, it doesn't matter the source, you deliver the water to a farm or to an irrigation district. That's what those little green things are, is a crop, I guess. And then instead of the irrigation district pumping groundwater, that irrigation district doesn't pump the groundwater, and they take your water. So that's why there are those two lines in that well column that says reduce pumping at production. And so instead of pumping the groundwater, they use the non-groundwater supplies, and then that saves groundwater in the aquifer, which is what's represented by that more blue color down in the aquifer itself. That's the water then, as a water provider, you get to go ahead and recover in your recovery wells. And this is the location of the groundwater savings facilities in the Pinal AMA. So I will just add about this is that there is not a one type of facility is better than another. These are just two different methods, and depending on your situation, one facility might work better than another, or a combination of facilities. So let's just kind of talk for a few minutes about how much this tool is being used. You know, I talked about back in the 80s and the 90s when we passed that program. So we've been storing water in the ground for a long time. This graphic represents all the water that's been stored in the active management areas since the inception of the program. That's 13.36 million acre feet, over 4 trillion gallons. To give you a perspective, Arizona Water Company today uses about 20,000 acre feet a year of water. This would be a supply that would last us 668 years. Now let's take a look at effluent. And again, this is all effluent that's been stored in all of the active management areas since the inception of the program. And so 1.45 million acre feet of effluent has been stored. That's about 472 billion gallons. That is roughly 11% of all the water that's been stored since the inception of the program. And that's in all the AMAs. Now let's take a quick look at what's going on in Pinal. And by the way, this data is through 2022, so 2023 and 2024 are not included in this. So in the Pinal AMA, of all the water sources, there's been about 3.2 million acre feet of water stored. That's about 1 trillion gallons, and that's all water sources. And then of effluent, there's been about 27,350 acre feet, or 8.9 billion gallons. That is not even 1% of the total water that's been stored in the Pinal AMA. So storage in the Pinal AMA has by far been through CAP water. So let me talk just a little bit about our recharge program. So we consider recharge to be an extremely important part of our water management strategy. We are currently storing at 3 groundwater savings facilities. We've been doing this since 2015. And those facilities are those 3 irrigation districts that we're all familiar with. We own and operate the Pinal Valley Recharge and Recovery Facility. We've been operating it since 2020, and Mr. Thompson is our recharge hydrologist, and he's very good at what he does. And will become in the future, we'll become a sewer provider in the Pinal AMA, and we will absolutely include effluent storage and recovery. And then we own and operate 24 recovery wells that we use to pull that water out of the ground each year. So here's just a quick picture of Mr. Thompson's recharge project. And last year, we stored about 1,300 acre feet. We started storing in 2020. This year, we'll store 1,600 acre feet. And next year, I hope that we push up to 2,000, and we'll be operating this facility at its optimal levels. So last, what I want to do is kind of talk about our water resource strategy and kind of how some of this stuff all fits together. So at Arizona Water Company, we have 2 water resource strategies. One is to secure and maintain a diverse water supply portfolio, And 2 is to promote the efficient use of all the water supplies that we have. And I'm going to actually start with the second one first because I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the first one. So when I say we promote the efficient use of all water supplies, I mean every single person, every single entity, including Arizona Water Company, including the city, including the county, we all are going to use our water efficiently. It doesn't matter whether the customer arrived 100 years ago. It doesn't matter if they aren't going to arrive here for 10 years. Anybody who lives here is going to use their water supply efficiently. And it doesn't matter the type of use. It doesn't matter if it's a golf course. It doesn't matter if it's a home. It doesn't matter if it's a cow, the landscape watering that you brought up. It doesn't matter if it's Lucid Motors or the Wendy's, right? So everyone is going to use water efficiently. And it does not matter the supply source. So we don't care if it's CAP water. We don't care if it's effluent. We don't care if it's groundwater. In fact, those supplies are all commingled together. So it doesn't matter. We live in a desert. We're going to use every drop of water we have as efficiently as possible. So that's one piece of it. We also look at using the water efficiency as a type of water supply. So if we use our water efficiently, then we will not have to go out and acquire as much water as we would otherwise have to. But let's talk about the diverse water supply portfolio. So our goal as a water utility is to provide a reliable and sustainable water supply to our customers under a variety of hydrologic and operational conditions. So my boss does not ever want me to say, oh, gee, we can't deliver water. So my job is to make sure that we have a diverse water supply so that under any circumstance we can provide that water. So that's kind of tricky. And if you were to have a completely redundant water supply, then you would be looking at a much more expensive water supply and much more expensive costs for providing water. So we are balancing that redundancy with affordable prices. But redundancy of the water supply, redundancy of the infrastructure as well. And so these supplies become very important in this whole thing, and recharge becomes very important. Groundwater is an important source. Even groundwater itself is a diverse water supply because you're pumping from multiple wells, so you're not dependent upon one particular source. CAP water, as we've learned in recent years, is not as reliable as we thought that it would be. So you need the groundwater to back up the CAP supplies. We also need effluent. Effluent is the only source of supply that continues to grow. So groundwater, we have basically a finite amount of groundwater unless you artificially recharge it. There's a small amount of incidental and small amount of natural recharge, but for the most part, it's a finite amount. And so effluent is the one supply that grows. So it's a really important resource from that perspective. Recharge is important because that's the primary mechanism we're going to use to create that balance of the redundancy and create an affordable supply for our customers. So it all works together. And if you'll just humor me for a moment, if you looked at water resources the way you would your retirement portfolio, you would start to understand how this works. So, for example, your 401k is essentially the groundwater that we have. So you have a certain amount, or at least I have a certain amount of money in my 401k, and it's not limitless. And so I have to figure out how to make that last over my entire lifespan. One day, I hope to have Social Security, and so that's going to come in every single month. So that's like a renewable water supply. Maybe I have an annuity somewhere. Maybe I have a pension. Those are going to come in on a monthly basis. And so I need to manage my groundwater supply. I need to manage my 401k to last throughout my life. I do that by using my renewable supplies, and then maybe I go out and get a job, and I recharge my account, put a little more money in it. Maybe I get a part-time gig, something like that. And so if you look at the way you manage your water portfolio, that's essentially the same way that we manage our water supply. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I think my job is to pass the mantle off to David Dunaway, who's going to describe, once the water's recovered, what he does to make sure that it meets drinking water standards. Unless there's some questions.
Any questions for Terri Sue? Great. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dave Dunaway. I'm the general manager of Arizona Water Company's Pinal Valley water system. But 24 years ago, I walked into a windowless room to start looking at rock samples and old well records to help farmers find the best place to put their wells so that they could make sure their cows were watered and their crops were grown. 23 years later, I started at Arizona Water Company, but had a number of stops at ADEQ, where I was a manager over a portion of the Safe Drinking Water Program, and then the entirety of the Aquifer Protection Program, including wastewater and collection systems. Then after that, in between Arizona Water Company, I worked for CAP, where I worked for the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. So I've seen all facets of what we've talked today.
So you're saying you can't hold a job?
Yes, or I'm good enough to bounce around
Just
at
checking.
least, right? I'm at my forever home, though, I will say. So I want to begin my discussion on the safe drinking water, providing safe drinking water with the regulations. We start with literal acts of Congress in terms of the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, which has gotten modified every couple of years. That turns into federal rules in the Code of Federal Regulations, which tells the states how to implement programs which protect safe drinking water. Arizona itself then comes up with its own statutes to help make sure that we cover all aspects and go above and beyond the federal government in limited cases. The state has its own administrative code where it tells the water systems how to go about providing safe drinking water. The state also provides engineering bulletins that, kind of separate from the regulations, might get into a little more detail about how you design a water system. Arizona also has substantive policy statements, which is the version of if you're in a discussion with your spouse, no, what I meant to say was this. Then the non-substantive policy statements, which aren't in writing, but you have to kind of pick up between the lines. That was about a minute just going over the overview, but there's even more because it goes beyond just safe drinking water. Well, our labs and our samplers are governed by regulations from the Department of Health Services. We at Arizona Water Company are regulated by the Corporation Commission as a public service corporation. If we're going to make sure we supply water all the time, we've got to make sure we have emergency generators, which are covered under Title V of the Clean Air Act. Then there's the disposal of waste properly. It takes a village and a team of experts to do this, and that's even before the shout-outs in Terri Sue's arena, where, oh, by the way, to get a designation of assured water supply or a certificate of assured water supply, we got to make sure that we're obeying ADEQ in order to make that happen. So before we've looked at a length of pipe or a treatment plant, we've spent a lot of time on governance, and I do challenge folks to find a more thoroughly regulated industry than we are. And the theme of my discussion, as well as was Kevin's, well, we hold ourselves to a higher standard than just the regulations. So if I've oversimplified those regulations, let me oversimplify what a water system looks like. Here in the Pinal Valley system, or in the Pinal Valley system, we're based primarily on groundwater. So we start with the well, but that well can be over 1,000 feet deep, and that's what we primarily use as our source water. It's more of an accounting thing about the recovery than it is the production of water. Now, if you've ever struggled with a shower curtain rod, size that up several dozen times so that it can produce hundreds of gallons a minute. It takes a lot of engineering and thought in how you design and operate these water systems. But after we get the water out of the ground, we have to chlorinate to verify the water is free of bacteria, and that's our very first treatment step. And that happens universally at all wells for Arizona Water Company. Some of our wells, we do have treatment where we pull out harmful chemicals like arsenic, nitrate, or fluoride. And when we do that, we test at those treatment plants constantly to make sure that they're working properly and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Much as I saw on the drive here over to Florence, we then store the water in tanks to make sure that we can meet peak demand and we can meet emergency situations. Before water even goes into the distribution system at people's houses, well, we're testing even more there, but then just to make sure, We also test within the distribution system near people's houses so that we have a full and thorough understanding of what the water is where people drink it. Once every 3 years, the friendly folks at ADEQ do pay us a visit. So I can echo Kevin's sentiment of they show up as frequently as they like, but no less than once every 3 years. And when I was talking about sampling in a number of locations, oh boy, there's a lot of sampling. The state and federal government in the Pinal Valley system every year would like us to take 938 samples. And that's a lot just by itself. But we don't stop there. At Arizona Water Company, we're taking over 3 times the number of operational samples that we hold ourselves to make sure that we are serving safe drinking water above and beyond what the government wants us to. And in a case, as you can see, where there's a 0 for treatment verification and a 0 for tank samples, despite thousands of pages of regulation, we're taking samples in places the government didn't really ask us to, just to make sure the water is safe and we understand it from start to finish. Before I started at Arizona Water Company, and what sold me on working here, despite a claim of job hopping, was it was described as compliance is not an option. It's a drop-dead requirement. As a former regulator, somebody who's worked in water a long time, that was music to my ears. After decades of working in water and public health, like I was saying, there's just compliance down here, and then there's where we are. Now, these water samples are sent to state-certified labs, again, with their own body of regulation. We are very lucky in Arizona to have really good ones here. But even then, for a handful of the really complicated tests with stuff I don't want to pronounce in a public venue, we have to ship those samples out to California and Ohio because there are so few specialized equipment needed to detect down to these super, super tiny levels that we need to for compliance, or above compliance in our case. But who takes those samples and who runs those plants? Trained and certified experts. Out of 295 Arizona Water employees overall, all of our systems, our support staff, just about half of us, 135, hold at least one level of certification. 34 of us in Pinal Valley are certified operators. Again, about half of our 70-plus staff. Now, on drinking water, there's 2 kinds of certified operators. You hold one license to operate the treatment plants, and you hold another license to operate the distribution systems. There's 4 grades in each class. The first one is the first step. Grade 4 is the pinnacle of your career. And so the table there gives the breakdown of certified operators and their level, both for Arizona Water Company and Pinal Valley. Something very interesting, you tend to have the most either at the begin or the end of your career. We've got the most, first level grades or the 4th level grades. Folks tend to stay at Arizona Water Company a long time and progress through their career. So you'll see a distribution where you've got more at either end. The data nerd in me really enjoys that. Legally speaking, though, you technically only need 2 certified operators, one that holds certifications at the grade of your water system and your distribution system, and one more as a backup. We have many, many more than that. How does one become a certified operator? Well, state law says you have to meet minimum requirements for experience, education, general knowledge, and at each of these levels, you have to pass a 100-question test developed by a national board of experts. So at Pinal Partnership about a week ago, there was discussions of workforce development, right? How do we make more operators? We are trying to do our part. We work with Central Arizona College to develop training classes and bringing certification exams to Pinal County rather than having to go to Phoenix or Tucson. And I've made sure that bottom photo was a little fuzzy so no one was forced to take the math or look at the math that's required. I myself hold grade 4 certification in water treatment, water distribution, and even wastewater treatment. So Clifton, if you need me to pick up a shift, sir, let me know. I'll drop on by. Also, most utilities require you, or most utilities let you take samples your very first day on the job. Not Arizona Water Company. You have to be a certified operator before we'll even let you touch a sample bottle. Why do we need this level of expertise? As you can see on the screen, water is so much more complicated than just turning on a tap. The top photo is one of Pinal Valley's nitrate removal plants north of Mission Royale. Kind of hard to make out, but each one of those 5 treatment vessels has a myriad of valves, actuators, electrical panels, ways of bringing water in, taking water out, putting it to backwash, putting it for disposal. And that's a lot of stuff that people have to keep track of. More of a zoomed-in photo on the bottom is a pilot test we recently conducted in Coolidge to better remove fluoride. Despite being in a Connex box and about 130 degrees, there's over a dozen input panels, 9 sampling ports, multiple chemical pumps, and 1 very loud air relief valve. Simply stated, treating and delivering safe water so that our customers can turn on the tap is a very detailed and complex process. But I encourage you not to just take my word for it. All water systems are required to publish a consumer confidence report each year where they document the water quality and the sample results. So I encourage everyone to visit our website, www.azwater.com. The header at the top, look for water quality. Very first on the link there, consumer confidence reports. We are just about to put up 2024's water reports here in the next couple of weeks. Final thought, on a personal level, I live in Casa Grande within our water system. My kids drink the water. I drink the water. I took this job here in Casa Grande because I believed in the people and I believed in the company. So I am just one resident of Casa Grande, but I believe in what we do. And I put it to the test every day. I'm not going to jeopardize my family. And the same is true for the rest of our leadership team. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I think that wraps everything up. I'm happy to take questions or bring up the appropriate person.
Any questions? Mr. Surtee, you think we covered it?
I think over-covered it, actually. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, and seriously though, I want everybody to understand how regulated the water systems are, how much regulation goes into supplying water to the residents of Arizona overall. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have probably some of the top operators in our county here, but it's not what was depicted in Facebook at all. It's not even close to that. So I want everybody to understand that we really do put a lot of effort in ensuring our water supply is safe to all Arizonans.
If anything, Steve, obviously all of the water companies are very safe. One of the questions might be if there is recharging going on and there are private wells in the area, how do we know that the private wells are not affected and getting some runoff from what's being recharged? That might be a question that
they can pull samples and send them to a lab, can they not? I mean,
Yeah, so-
you can have your water tested anywhere. I mean, there's ways to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, so I mean, there's a two-pronged approach in that case. One, there's engineering design requirements around the recharge basins to make sure that nearby wells are not impacted. But as Chairman Miller pointed out, there are various county programs that will sponsor well testing and work that the Department of Health Services does to help folks with private wells also test their water. That being said, the water that's being recharged is of incredibly high quality. So you're putting good in, so good is going to come out.
And you have to understand that people are worried about this. I mean, it happens with the copper mines. They're worried that Resolution Copper, which is actually below the water line, they're actually operating below the water line, there was a big controversy here in Florence about Florence copper. What is it going to do to the aquifer, et cetera? So those are questions that still might be out there, that this is totally different, and what's happening with this recharging of effluent is completely different.
Completely separate, sir, yes.
I'm interested.
I'll just quickly add, all recharge
Identify yourself and then just kind of tell us.
Sorry. All recharge facilities, and it doesn't matter if it's a constructed recharge or a managed recharge, effluent or CAP, you have to have, as part of your permit, monitor wells that are positioned around that facility. And by the hydrologic models, they will be your canary in the mine, so to speak. You will see how that water has changed as it went through the aquifer, and you'll see the water quality of it. And you report, usually it can be anywhere from monthly to quarterly to semi-annual. You'll report that to the ADQ and ADWR, and you have to show that nothing's changing, that you're putting high-quality water in the ground, and what's in the aquifer at that point is that quality or better. And usually because you're mixing it with the aquifer that is already the natural aquifer there, usually the quality is even better than what you started with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you identify yourself? I'm sorry.
I'm Dick Thompson.
Dick
I'm
Thompson,
with Arizona Water Company.
And Chair, Mr. Thompson, one more quick question. So you monitor wells. So how far out are your monitor wells from your injection well? Just roughly.
It really depends on your permit. Mm-hmm. And what they do is before you ever get your permit, you have to run a hydrologic model and say, this is the aquifer, this is how the groundwater is moving in that area. This is how we're going to either inject or recharge through spreading basins. And this is what we predict where the water will go as it hits the aquifer. And so then you position those monitor wells as close or as far as you need so that you have time to react to any changes.
So assuming that the water is flowing underground, then you would put it in the direction of the flow or the downslope of that geologic area.
And usually on recharge facilities, you bracket them. You put them not only up, you put them upstream and downstream so that you can say, okay, this water that's moving through the aquifer at this point, it comes in like this. We've recharged the water. And here's the water that's moving away from the recharge facility.
So for a simple question, like quarter mile, half a mile, less than a quarter. That's all I was really asking. Okay.
Yeah, and it depends on the velocity of the groundwater.
Certainly, I understand that, but for big picture, quarter mile or less.
Or less.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor 32, I want to just, if somebody goes out, they drill a well, and they question the quality, there's organizations, or the state will test that water. You can get it to a testing place to find out if your water quality, what it is, and what's in it. I mean, the exempt wells, the 35 gallons or less, are all over the state, but those there's availability to have that water tested. And if there is a concern, I would suggest that a person have it tested.
Yes. And this is a concern of most of us because not all of our residents are in incorporated areas, which they don't have sewer, they have septics, and they have their own sources. So it is important to people.
Yeah. So
I have an anecdote from my experience down in Tucson. We had a very large recharge facility, and when we came online, we reached out to all of our neighbors that had the 35 gallon per minute wells and said, we'll test your well. We'll test it before we start and after and during so that you can see how it changes. And we had a small response, but we did that. And one of the really nice things that helped our public perception of this was there were so many of those people that lived around us that were thrilled that their water levels were coming up.
yeah.
And it wasn't just all the CAP water, it was this CAP water pushing the natural groundwater up as well. So all of a sudden, they no longer had to worry about their wells going dry in the next 10 years.
Yeah. No, it's a really good program. So I hope this puts some people at ease on their water supplies, and I can't thank the three entities, the City of Casa Grande, Arizona Water, and the two divisions of Arizona Water, to do this presentation. It's very important. We'll put it out on our social media and website so other people can see it and direct people to watch it in the future. Thank you for everything.